we'd like to welcome you all to Miners Hall Museum. I'm Phyllis Bittner. I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees here. And this is going to be a great program. We have 3 wonderful speakers, and we know you're going to enjoy everything that they have to tell you about this. So I'm going to turn it over. David Wallace is our host for the whole quarterly exhibit of the coal camp of mineral. And then he's put together 3 programs for you, and this is the final program. And today is the last day. The exhibit is coming down. So if you haven't seen it, be sure that you take a trip through before you leave today, because it'll be leaving the museum, and our next exhibit will be coming on July 1st. So David, if you'll come up and you can introduce your guests.
Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Oh, this thing really works. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. I've been asked to do things here at the museum, and it's been a wonderful experience for me being involved with all the people here at the museum, with the people at Big Brutus. The people at around Southeast Kansas have just been very, very kind to me, and I've really enjoyed working with them. Today, I set up this. There's 3 programs associated with the quarterly exhibit. I did the first one was People and Places of West Mineral. I did that in April, and then we had Jimmy Lovell and Carmen here talking about Big Brutus and the mining history of West Mineral in the area. And today, I set this up because I had questions. I actually wanted to do something like this in the WEIR display I did 4 years ago. But we were fortunate enough when I asked Phyllis, I said, Phyllis, I'd like to get somebody in here to talk about geology, about how the coal got here, and about these guys that dug. They all talk about the layers. They'd go down, there'd be layers of coal here, and then they'd go down deeper and get more coal, and there'd be different kinds of stuff. And I'd like to get somebody here that knows about this stuff and tell us something about the geology of coal mining. And she had talked to Andy. Andy had volunteered to do that for her not long before we spoke, and so I called Andy. He said, I don't know what you do at KU, but he's gonna tell us. He said he was from KU. They said he was from KU, so I said, that's our guy. So Andy's gonna speak first, and then we're gonna have, and he's gonna talk about geology, and I'm really impressed with all this stuff he brought. My goodness. And then Larry Spahn is gonna talk about the surface mining, it's not surface mining, it's surface mining what? Section?
Yes, section.
Of Kansas Health and Environment.
Yes.
And he's going to tell us about the reclamation that's gone on after mining in Southeast Kansas. And then we have David Jenkins from Kansas Parks and Wildlife, and he's going to tell us about how that all came to be and what he does down there and some of the services they offer there. So we're going to start off with Andy, and Andy, it's all yours. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. And before I forget, tell Ryan if I have a bottle of water already. Thank you, I appreciate it. So I'm Andy Connolly. I am an educator at the Kansas Geological Survey. Out of curiosity, has anyone heard of the Kansas Geological Survey before? Okay, few of you have, excellent. So it is a state institute. So we work with both the University of Kansas and the people of our state to learn about our natural resources. And we cover big topic issues and small ones, big ones being like the aquifers. Thank you so much. The aquifers of Kansas. You may have heard of the Ogallala Aquifer and how that impacts people in western Kansas. Well, we have fantastic wells that monitor the level of that aquifer, of how much water is left. And we have some of the best aquifer data across the US. So not only do we study aquifers, we also study earthquakes, both man-made and natural. We study all the energy resources. And we also study other things regarding geoarchaeology, fossils, and recently we started a new program in geohealth. How does the geology and natural resources impact communities and their health? For my background, I grew up in Kansas. I grew up in Lawrence. I fell in love with fossils. I would go fossil hunting all the time. Kansas, I think, is one of the best places in the US to go looking for fossils. And that spurred on an honest appreciation for geology. I got my 2 degrees in geology, studying fossils, in particular Mosasaurus, one of our state fossils. and I went on to work for the Park Service as a park ranger before going on to work here at the Kansas Geological Survey. So I tell people that my knowledge of geology, imagine like a swimming pool, like a big swimming pool. It's wide, but it's pretty shallow. You can walk through it and it's fine, but when you get to the fossil section, it just drops 20 feet. But I got a nice big approximation knowledge of a lot of things. So when David asked me to give a presentation here, I wanted to do a general overview of the geologic history of the state, and also do a particular focus, of course, on the southeastern portion. I got a lot of cool things up here. You are more than welcome to interrupt me at any time, and afterwards you are more than welcome to come up and ask questions about all the things that I have here. But yeah, let's get at it. So the first thing, we got the TV screen here. Probably can't see my computer screen down there, but that's okay. So basically, if I tell people 3 things to take away from the influence of Kansas, it's ancient oceans, the Rocky Mountains, and ice ages. Throughout the state, if you look across the features that govern natural landmarks, the Red Hills, the Flint Hills, the coal, and the other natural resources, all those can be traced back to one of these 3 sources of information. And so we're going to be covering that. And so out of curiosity, has anyone taken a geology course before? All right, cool. So I'll try not to get too much into the technical detail. I'll try to go more broad here. I will also say that I got some pamphlets up here, so if you want to learn more, you're more than welcome to take some of these home and give you more information. Well, let's get to it. So our first stop is called the Paleozoic. It's a time period that was before the age of dinosaurs even existed. This was during when fish were alive, maybe amphibians, maybe reptiles, but that's it. And for 500 to 260 million years ago, Kansas was regularly covered by seas. They would go up and down regularly. And this photo right here is very typical of what you would see driving across Kansas. You go into, you see a road cut, you look off to your side, what do you see? You see blocky, tan limestone, you see thin beds of black shale, rinse and repeat. These are all brought in by oceans. They'll come in, they'll drop sediment, they'll retreat, rinse and repeat. And so when I tell people Kansas used to be underneath an ocean, not once but multiple times, it's always surprising because it took me a long time before I first saw my official beach, if you don't count Clinton Lake, because we are so far away from any major sea, any major ocean. But we can see those in the fossil record. And I'll get to that evidence in just a moment. But first, I want to cover this. You may have seen something like this before. This is a basic geologic map of Kansas. All the colors here represent different layers of rocks exposed in the surface, basically representing different time periods throughout history. And so the oldest exposed layers of rocks are that bottom right corner in Cherokee County. Those are the oldest layers. And from there, generally speaking, as you go westward, you're going from older to younger layers of rocks. It doesn't mean that those older layers of rocks are gone, it's just that they're buried. In that cross section there, we can see that. So Kansas Mineral, it slopes upward, sloping upwards towards the Rocky Mountains. As it slopes upward, we're getting into younger layers of rocks. That is one of the principal foundations of geology, the law of superposition. Older layers are at bottom, younger layers are on top. As like I said before, I'm an educator, so I always tell my kids, when you make a layer of cake, do you start at the top? No, you start at the bottom. You put the bottom first, and then the middle layer, and then the top layer. And same thing for here. Those older layers are deposited or laid down first, and you slowly make your way upward. And so I want to give this as like a little preview here because we're going to also kind of point at certain features here that you'll soon recognize that are across the state. Anyone have any questions before I go on? It's okay. I
have
talk
a
a lot.
comment.
Yes, yep, comment.
Yes, even though it's only in Cherokee County that the rocks go down into the Carboniferous system, here in Crawford County, we have many, many holes that were dug down into that and
Yes.
piled up. So it's good that you were able to become a geologist in Lawrence when we here in Crawford County were able to walk along in the strip pits and find enough crinoid shells
Yes.
and little discs that we could collect them sufficiently to use them as poker chips when we
Crinoids are one of my favorite fossils too because they're such a weird animal. Yes, I'll actually talk about that in just a moment. So the first thing I want to cover was the origin of the Tri-State Mining District. So the things that cover southeast Kansas, northeast Oklahoma, southwest Missouri. And so we're familiar with minerals like galena, which is this beautiful, yeah, we got one right here, and we got a nice smaller sample right here, and we'll pass this one out. This, I think, is a great Geology 101 mineral for students to observe because it's cubic in shape, and I didn't cut it like that. That is how it naturally grows over time. Some crystals will grow cubes, some of them will grow prisms like quartz, some of them don't really have a shape, they can't really figure themselves out. Some of them though are like mica. I don't want to get too off the beaten path here, but mica, it splits into these thin layers, and that's how its shape is that they can make really thin sheets of this mineral, and they used to make windows out of them too, which is really interesting. And so how did these minerals get here? So basically, millions of years ago, we have this ocean. The ocean dropped layers of limestone, like this sample that we see here. So it dropped these layers of limestone, it went away, and then on top, it came back and dropped layers of shale. So what's a big difference that we observe between the limestone and the shale? There's holes in it, right? So what's happening is that after the shale was dropped on top of it, something happened. The earth beneath the ground shook, it cracked, and fissures appeared within the layers of rocks. And within these fissures, magma shot through the cracks and filled in the holes within the limestone. The shale, on the other hand, acted as a sealant. It's thick, it's impenetrable. And so even though the shale was already down there, the fissures full of magma, of zinc and lead could not penetrate the shale. So all the galena and all the zinc that you find here are from that Mississippian age rocks. Within those rocks is a rock called chert. So you'll find samples like these, where you'll have something like the sphalerite, and it's basically glued or lodged on to the chert sample. That is our.
Whoops.
Boop, boop, boop.
Nice.
Might be low on battery by the flashing sign. But I'll keep going, I have a loud voice. Anyway, that is our best estimate of what we think was the origin of these minerals. Does anyone have any questions about, yes?
What about the meteor theory of lead and zinc?
I'm glad you brought this up. So David was the one who brought this attention to me, and this was the first time I heard about it, and I got so curious. You're getting a bonus presentation. So we're gonna go down this road here. So, okay, go. So when I first heard, so the idea is that there's an asteroid that came down to Earth hundreds of millions of years ago. This asteroid brought with it all the lead and zinc and slammed into the Earth and deposited all those minerals on it. It then got buried over time, and then we can find it. So David brought that attention to me, probably because of you, and
This was an article in the
Yes.
daily, in the Columbus News Report back in 2017. That's Larry Hyatt's newspaper.
Yeah.
I sent you the article.
Don Fury was the author's name.
yes, and so excellent. There we go again. Thank you. So, yes, and so I read through it. I'm going to pull it down just a little bit. So I read through it, and so basically the idea is that that an asteroid landed in Kansas millions of years ago and brought with it the minerals that deposited it. So Don Fleury, he came up with this idea because he observed some maps and he was familiar with the region. He said, okay, this may look like an asteroid impact. You can see the crater here and things like that. And at this point, I looked at this, and whenever I hear a new idea, I have to put on my critical thinking cap to think about, is this a valid hypothesis that's being explored right now? Even if an idea seems outlandish or crazy, it's always, always in your interest to explore it with an open mind and be ready to challenge your own preconceived possibilities. So, whenever I read something like this, I usually approach it with these 5 things in mind. So, does the article reference a journal article? So does the newspaper reference a journal article? Does the scientist have a relevant background? Are multiple people interviewed, particularly from an esteemed institute? Did the scientists eliminate other hypotheses? And did the scientists address problems within their own hypothesis? So let's cover these 5 things. I know this is not the main part of our talk, but I got so interested in this, I just went down this rabbit hole, so sorry about that. So I look for red flags. And so the first red flag, does the article reference a journal article? Journal articles are scientifically reviewed articles where scientists review a paper and say, does the facts check out? And in this case, the article mentioned, Don Fleury did not publish a scientific article that was put in review by other scientists. He was the one that came up with the idea and proposed it, and did not go through some sort of committee for other scientists to review it. Because of which, since there's no reference to an article where I can actually read and go through his information in depth, this is a red flag to me. Does the scientist have a relevant background? This is more of a pink flag. He does have a geology engineering degree, but he doesn't have any history of publishing materials related to asteroids or mining or galena and sphalerite in the region. So he may have some of the knowledge, but doesn't look like he has the research history to back it up. Come on, there we go. Are multiple people interviewed, particularly from an esteemed institute? So one person is valuable. I make mistakes. I'm biased. I love fossils. That means I don't make a lot of money. But multiple people can offer different perspectives. One person may completely forget something. One person may be biased towards something that they love. It takes a lot of people to fact check this and see if this is a realistic idea. And particularly if they interview a scientist that wasn't involved in the study, that's even more A+. In this case, only Don Fleury is interviewed. No other scientists were talked about or interviewed in the interview.
Clip it back on your shirt and see if it doesn't stop cutting out, please.
Yes. I can do that.
Just wait.
How that? We'll try that.
Let's see.
Did the scientists eliminate other hypotheses? So basically, did the scientists take their idea and say, okay, so maybe the asteroid brought in galena and the other minerals. Is there something else? Is there another way that these minerals came in? Don Fleury did not address how other possibilities that these minerals came in. He didn't address it at all or eliminate other ideas. He also said that there weren't any other credible resources out there explaining the origin of these minerals, which I know is not true because we, the Kansas Geological Survey, actually published material on this back in 2001, and the article came out in 2017, I want to say. So those are two red flags. The second red flag is me because I'm biased because I work for the Kansas Geological Survey. And finally, did the scientists address problems with our hypothesis? It's always good to show when there's weakness in it and where strength can be continued to be made in order to reaffirm that hypothesis. In this case, he does not address any problems with his hypothesis or what further research can be done to it. So even without a background in geology, you can still go through these steps and think critically about the material being presented and whether it is of sound resource. As for my professional opinion, I do not support the asteroid hypothesis for several reasons. One of it is there's a really cool thing called impact crystals, and it's basically, as the name implies, meteor comes in and slams into the ground, and at that extreme force of something coming in, of all this weight, of all this velocity, it's coming in, that's going to change the makeup of minerals. That's going to create what's called high-grade metamorphic rocks or minerals at a short amount of time. And as far as I can tell, we're not seeing that in those layers of rocks. Additionally, asteroid samples, are we going to try again?
Andy, if you don't mind, because for some reason, I know that when you move,
I do move around a lot.
yeah.
That's my problem. That's why I work good for children, because I move around with them.
Let's try that.
Okay, I'll try my best not to move around. Other asteroid samples that we know of do not contain galena of sphalerite, which is common in southeastern Kansas. And then finally, we have shown in tests and studies that galena and sphalerite most naturally grow in slow-moving circumstances with a lot of water involved, which is what we think happened. The idea that they came in through veins and interacted with water. So, I'm really glad you brought it up. I don't support the asteroid hypothesis idea, but I think it's still really good to keep those. I'm not saying like it's a horrible idea to begin with. It's always good to come up with ideas and try to propose how things work in the earth, but it's always good to keep a critical mind and think about, is this something that is too good to be true? Or is this something that was done with robust research and experience behind it? Kind of went off the beaten path there. Does anyone have any questions about that before we go back to the geologic history of our state?
Has there ever been any evidence of this happening in other places, something of that nature?
Yes, so actually there is evidence, even in Kansas history, of asteroid impacts. You can also find shock crystals in other time periods, but nothing of bringing in a large amount of minerals and resources to one spot. And yes?
My concern is how wide and how long, in other words, how large is this field that we've mined? And that should give you some determination of the size of the meteor, and I can't imagine it being that big.
No, yeah. When he was saying the weight of it, I was looking at the weight and I was like, well, if we had a meteor of that size, it would have caused a mass extinction and just wipe out a whole bunch of life, and we're not seeing that in the fossil record. What's up?
Are you familiar with the issue up in Buffalo, Kansas, minerals that's in there that's rare?
No, please tell me.
Okay, there's at Buffalo, Kansas, it's a short little town up here.
Okay.
There's a area right there they're digging that's got some definite minerals in there that's nowhere else in the state of Kansas.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's been going for quite some time. They're using it in cattle feed. There's a particular mineral in there they're digging out.
Okay.
And there's only one other area that has this, and somewhere in Texas, I think. You might look into that Buffalo
Okay.
thing.
I will. Thank you.
They say it's from maybe a meteor, I'm not sure, but go look into that, Buffalo, Kansas.
Thank you. I will. Yeah, I always learn new things from people across the state, which I always love talking to folks about that. What's up?
I'm going to go really basic.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about sphalerite. For some reason.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I should have done that. I got ahead of myself. So sphalerite,
Zinc.
or zinc, yes.
Oh, okay.
So it contains, so sphalerite is a mineral that contains zinc in it.
Okay.
So the galena, the square one, was used for lead, and sphalerite is the one used for zinc.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, those are the two most important minerals that were used for mining.
We don't have a town called sphalerite.
It's a bit of mouthful, isn't it? There's a whole thing about geologists and names that I won't go down that path on, but yes. Although it is interesting, the mining may be done, but now, I talked about earlier about geohealth. We are beginning a big program of looking at the tailings and looking at the deposits of the mined materials across southeastern Kansas and whether we can further reuse them again and recycle them into electronic devices and things like that. So their purpose may come back again. Don't hold that accountable, don't quote me on that one. Like I said, that's still early in the stages, what I've heard through the grapevine. But those still might make a comeback.
Do you always find lead and zinc together?
I don't know, that is a good question.
No.
Um,
I've always heard lead and zinc mining in southeast Kansas, but I just wondered if they always go together.
That is a really good question. I'm gonna have to look into that one. I admit when I don't know things, because if someone starts saying things they don't know, then don't trust them. What's up?
Pittsburgh is here because we have coal,
Mhm.
and it takes more coal to smelt the sphalerite and the galena than it does sphalerite or galena. So you bring the ores to Pittsburgh, smelt them, that's why Pittsburgh is here.
That's right, and I'm glad you brought that up. So let's go and talk about why we're here as well. And so, back to the history of Kansas. We're gonna skip to the Pennsylvanian era, or period. So it's kind of hard to tell on this map, but North America is right,
Nice map.
there's no map, yeah. It's an ocean. It's an ocean, isn't it? Okay, hang on.
General Grant was in Galena, Illinois, when the war broke out, the Civil War broke out,
Come on.
and they were mining, I think, Galena, obviously.
During World War I, we produced the lead for the.
Yeah,
Okay.
they got a.
So there's all these cities named Galena all over, Larry was telling me about. There's several. There's not just Illinois, there's other places where named Galena. Did they mine Galena in all those places?
Yeah, yes.
You've got Leadville too.
Yeah.
That's so weird. I don't know why it's doing that. Oh, I think I see now. Is it doing that? All right.
Is the blue,
Sorry. Let me try one more time.
does your screen come up when it's all?
So it does come up, it's showing up the bottom bit, which is why I'm very confused. It's so weird. I don't know what's going on here. All right, there we go. We're good.
No problem.
Yeah.
It has to get ready for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm not the patient type. That's why I'm a geologist. Even though we got waiting a long time. All right. I know I'm going a little over time, so we're going to speed it back up again. So, basically, North America is on the equator. The world is warm and wet. Kansas is basically right on the equator. And that is what helps brings us the coal. Because if my mouse works, there we go. We got this beautiful ocean here, this beautiful coral reef community that we were talking about. And you may recognize some of these fossils. I got some of these fossils right here, which you're more than welcome to come up and view. But if you go to any road cut across eastern Kansas, you're bound to find these. We got horned coral on the bottom left, crinoids on the top left, which are basic, they kind of look like sea anemones. They got these long stalk made of discs, and they got these tentacles that they'll wave at the bottom of the ocean. We have bryozoans, which are like corals. On the bottom middle are snail shells. On the top right are brachiopods, which are kind of like clams or shells. And we got on the bottom right corals. So oceans coming back in and forth, back in and back, in and back multiple times, bringing in these shelled animals. But we also have something else as, oh yeah, I forgot, I should mention this. You can also find in a lot of older buildings across all of Kansas, the limestone, and within the limestone you can find the fossils, which I geek out about every time. And that's because fossils are harder than the surrounding rock. So when the rain comes, it dissolves away the limestone and the fossils begin to pop out. So you can really see some really cool fossil specimens in there. So at this time though, we have the Carboniferous period. Carbon comes from coal. The world's 90% of their coal supply come from this one time period alone. And it's a very interesting reason why. We're gonna skip forward. Because at this time, the trees are beginning to take off. Rainforests are growing, they are dominating across the land. But there's an issue to this. The trees had found success in their height, and they're able to go away from water and be able to grow inland. But because of which, they have a compound called lignin, and lignin is and cellulose, and these are both compounds that help give plants their strength. But the issue is that there are organisms that are not able to break it down and tear it apart. So they can't decompose it. So when you ever have a tree falls, it's just gonna sit there. And another tree falls, and it's gonna sit there. Nothing's decomposing it. So these trees are just gonna keep on falling on top of each other again and again and again. And eventually, through their own weight, they're gonna compress over and over until they become the coal that we know.
So they're not actually decomposing.
They're not decomposing. And so,
Coal's more of a fossil from a tree? Is that-
correct. So sometimes I like to show kids a coal when I'm showing fossils, and I'm like, yeah, it's an old tree. And after this time period, though, that's when fungi or mushroom relatives were able to evolve, adapt, and start eating and breaking down those trees, because now they're finally able to tap into that resource. Nature shows is that when you have an abundance of something, an organism's going to take advantage of it one way or the other. And soon enough, that fungi came in, broke down the trees, and there goes the coal. That's why most of the coal comes from this time period, because the fungi hadn't evolved yet. And so most of the trees are something called scale trees, which are very beautiful. I like to show these samples out, and I'm going to pass this one out as well. They're called scale trees, obviously, because they look like scales, but they're very interesting because as they grow, when they're like little close to the ground, each of these little divots are like little leaves kind of shooting off of it, and as they grow taller, those leaves aren't getting enough sunlight, so they shed off. So they're leaving the scales behind. So if a tree gets buried in a river, then it can properly fossilize because it's being covered by sand, it's not being covered by other plants, and can properly fossilize into these bark. You can also get beautiful samples of their ferns and their leaves as well. There's a really nice exhibit at the Natural History Museum of KU that goes into the history of forests of Kansas and has all these modern plant relatives that were found back then. What's up?
Is it related to any modern tree?
Yes, actually related to club moss. It's related to moss. Moss used to be much, much, much taller back in the day, but then other plants took over and basically drove this one to extinction. I'll try not to get too into the details. Like I say, I geek out when it comes to fossils. But the basic thing is that as the world was getting drier, the scale trees weren't able to compete in a drier environment, and they died out. And the ironic thing of it all, which I think is just almost poetic in a way, is because the trees are burying, the coal is not going anywhere. So what is happening? The trees are taking CO2 or carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and it's thus creating a reverse greenhouse effect. The world is getting colder. As it's getting colder, it's not able to survive colder, drier temperatures, and through its own demise, wiped itself out. So, throughout the history of the Earth, we can find the effects of plants and animals that we're not the only ones that have changed and affected our Earth's history. Other organisms have as well. So, yep, trees fall down, got some pressure, and basically it'll start off as peat, and as it gets buried and pressurized, it turns into lignite, bituminous, which is the most common type of coal found here in Kansas and across the world, And if it was further heat and pressurized, it'll turn into anthracite. So bituminous is basically 76 to 86% of it is basically carbon with quite a bit of high amount of sulfur in its content. And why it's so common here in southeastern Kansas is that this is a layer of rocks called the Cherokee group. And within each of those layers of rocks are about 12 to 14 interbeds of coal. And David, can I volunteer you for helping
Sure.
out?
Here,
I'll
let me-
take one side and you can take the other.
Okay, wait, let me see if I can get a shot of that, all right.
I brought a little bit too big of a map here, so. Oh, we don't want it upside down like that. All right, so.
Wow.
So again, these are the exposed layers of rocks across the state. The coal is most exposed down here. Throughout the rest of the state, it's still buried. It's not easily accessible. But in this one portion, most of the top layers have been eroded away to expose that coal layer. And that's one of the principal reasons why southeastern Kansas was dominant in the coal industry, was because it was definitely not fresh. It was very easily exposed, very easy to strip mine because of its surface exposure. Any questions about that?
So
Yes.
if I understand you right, so there's coal all across Kansas, it's just that it's very deep.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yep, correct. Mm-hmm.
Didn't know how deep is it, do we know?
Hundreds of feet, thousands of feet. Yeah. We have, this is what we call core, rock core. So we do regular drillings within the state. So you can go out in western, yeah, we can roll it up. I don't like to. Thank you, David. So we can go through we can drill across western Kansas, and we can go through all these different layers of rocks and find coal that may be buried deep below there. Yeah. Do you want me to do it? I can do it if you want. That way you can focus on the camera. It's really big. Yes, sir, in the hat.
Get in mainly the mineral seam and the Fleming seam. The mineral seam was flat as a tabletop. And there was a fire play in between the mineral and the Fleming. And the Fleming was undulated, and why wasn't it flat? Sometimes when the shovel would dig, they would dig into the coal, rather than scraping on the bottom where they could tell the sound that they were hitting the coal. They would dig into the coal and move the coal. But it would pitch up.
So it's not like you're asking why it's like not in uniform, like
Yeah.
thick beds like that? Yeah, that is a great question.
Could you repeat the question?
If I'm understanding the gentleman's question correctly, it's basically why are the beds not uniform in thickness? Part of it that is that, how do I want to go about this one? So as the seas rise and fall, the rivers are going to move with them. So as the seas drop, the rivers are going to cut further into it and start eroding down into the sand in the ground. When the oceans rise, they cover back up and the rivers retreat. Rivers very frequently will take away and destroy and remove material as they're eroding down into the ocean. And so sometimes it may hit an area that has a lot of coal in it, but it's breaking down and tearing apart that coal and dropping it back into the ocean. So there'll be instances where there may have been coal there at one point. It's just that the river has come in and just demolished it and then covered it back up again with sand.
Coal's there, but it's going up in hands, like this. And one, getting back to the asteroid theory, it acts like, or it looks like, the coal in bed is kind of fluid, and maybe an
Oh, I see.
asteroid comes in and causes
I
a
see.
wave, yeah.
I see. I think I get you now. And that's the second beautiful thing is that we have plate tectonics. During this time, North America is shifting and actually briefly crashed into Africa. And as it crashes into Africa, it's squeezing into the beds and it's creating folds within the beds there. I think that's probably what you're seeing, is my best guess. but I'm willing to look into that and
And
see.
if so, the mineral being below that, why wouldn't it affect that too? Like I said, the mineral would be flat as the tabletop, and then the Fleming on top of it would be.
Right. Yeah, like I said, that's my best guess, but I'm willing to definitely look into it and see if I can piece that out for you. I know there was another question. Yes.
I've always been told that our coal has a high level of sulfur.
Yes.
Let's say compared to Wyoming. Why is that? Is that evident from this?
That is a good question. I want to say the reason is because it wasn't very deep enough to fully squeeze out the sulfur. When it's heated, and you'll see a lot of times in nature that like wants to belong with like. So as things get squeezed and pushed together, the coal wants to find other coal, other carbon, and naturally form together. As it does so, it squeezes out any impurities that may be within it. And in this case, the coal wasn't very deep enough to fully squeeze out the sulfur.
I had a question about sandstone and limestone.
Yes.
Which is, you know, I see them mining limestone around here. We have limestone pits all over. But I thought that layer that's about 10 feet below the ground all through an area down here in Cherokee County, and I don't know how far it extends, is sandstone.
Right.
And yet Carmen tells me a lot of that's limestone. I can't imagine Midwest Mineral is mining in the same area for years. I can't think there's that much limestone in a 4-foot seam. Are the limestone seams huge or what?
You can get really big blocky like formations of limestone. Particularly when the ocean levels are deep, they're going to continuously drop layers upon layers of sediment that a lot of people in western Kansas would use back in the days to harvest and make buildings out of. So it is possible to have those thick layers of rocks.
We also have reefs.
Yes, and the coral reefs build upon them, yes.
They give you big deposits of limestone.
There are limestone caves that are thousands of feet deep, so there are levels of limestone, thousands of feet deep.
And,
Yes.
and what's the difference between that and that layer of sandstone that my cellar is built out of sandstone?
Not old, not compressed, just kind of some silt from a river.
And all these, many of the foundations on the old homes here were set on sandstone foundations. Would that not work with limestone? They don't do that with limestone?
Limestone is just deeper, or.
But it would work just as well for a foundation or to build a cellar from, and some of the cellars that I think maybe are built from sandstone are actually built from limestone?
Or could have been if it were more available.
It depends on the limestone too. If it's too porous, it won't make a good foundation.
Sorry, I see a young lady here, and I'll get to you, sir. So what's your question?
So, not to change the subject from limestone and
Sure.
sandstone, but when you talked about the river scraping off the coal, and then did it deposit it someplace else then?
And
Just
event-
randomly?
And eventually, because the coal is natural, it's made of carbon, that coal gets broken down by organisms that may be in the sea and be worked into other critters as well. It's just that the coal that's buried here is not exposed and is as such not able to be broken down by other critters. And then one more question, then I want to make sure I don't use up too much of my other speakers' time.
I lived in Carthage, Missouri a while, and they have beautiful Carthage marble. And they tell me that some of those caverns are 40 and 50 feet deep, or thick.
Yes.
And I thought Carthage marble came from North Africa, but it comes from Carthage, Missouri.
Yeah,
It's
you
some
can
of the
get-
best marble in this country.
I know. I think to myself, just like, Kansas is a sedimentary state. It's like, what rocks do we have? Sandstone, shale, limestone, and that's about it.
How about salt?
Yeah, actually, let's go into that. Okay, I don't want to be rude to my speakers.
Go ahead, you're good, Andy.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, we're gonna go cover some other bits of the state, and we'll wrap it up. But let's get to the salt. Let's see if my mouse works this time. Yeah, it works. First, Flint Hills. Anyone been to the Flint Hills? Excellent. Very beautiful. Love that place. The reason why the Flint Hills exist is because of chert. The chert is also known as flint, and basically microorganisms like plankton are rich with quartz, rich with silica. When they died, they fell to the bottom of the ocean and they recrystallized into nodules of chert like this. But chert is hard, and it's much harder than sandstone. If I were to, I'm not going to because that would make me sad, but if I were to take this and smash it on the ground, it will like fall into pieces. If I were to do the same thing here, I think I would dent the floor more than the chert. Chert acts as a protective cap and creates a barrier for the softer shale and limestone beneath it. I think one of the more iconic shots of the Flint Hills as such is if you see something like a landscape, you see the flint going alongside it like that, and you see cows grazing underneath it. I think it's like the perfect representation of that, because that's not good grazing land. But it's, I mean, excuse me, not good farming land. But that chert makes it hard to farm into it. But it's great for grazing. And so this is one of the reasons why the Flint Hills is one of the last tall grass prairie remnants in the country, is because that flint made it hard for people to farm in the first place.
Well, the grass is also richer in minerals, and they fatten up quicker.
And I'll also say, if you go to Manhattan, visit the Flint Hills Natural History Museum, recently built back in 2012. Discovery Center, yeah, excuse me. And fantastic museum.
Why would anyone go to Manhattan?
What's up?
Why would anyone go to Manhattan?
Because it's the best university in the state.
He did it.
So, not only did the oceans make the Flint Hills, the oceans also made the dramatic, nope, okay. Okay, I think my mouth's, Red Hills. So, during the Permian period, 270 million years ago, that's when the oceans were drying up. As they're drying up, the oceans are rich with salt and other crystals. And salt can only be dissolved in water for so long before it begins to precipitate out. And as it does so, it creates like a Great Salt Lake situation in the Red Hills. So please don't lick it, but this is salt. So we got things like salt, and we also get things like gypsum or selenite that appear in this area. And the gypsum and selenite also act as a protective cap. The Red Hills are rich with iron, but on top of that is the gypsum that helps protect them from the weaker, helps protect the weaker layers below it. So you can go out there, you can find desert rose, which is like a really cool looking gypsum that kind of looks like a rose shape. It's really neat. You can find beautiful samples of that. And if you go to Hutchinson, see, I'm dropping all the names from all the different places, Kansas. You can go to the Statica Mine, which is like a big salt cavern. You go down there and you can see all the salt. But the problem is that that's where a lot of caverns and caves can open up in Kansas, because water flows underground. As it flows underground, it hits into the salt that's buried there. It starts dissolving it, and you can have huge sinkholes appear. There's a place called Big Basin Prairie Preserve near Dodge City, and that's one that's formed because the salt was dissolved underground like that. Oh, yes. Oh, wait, I have a map for this up here. I forgot my own ingenuity. Okay, see, the Red Hills, funny enough, located blue right here, and the Flint Hills are right here. Basically, if you look at this diamond shape of the Flint on this map, that's the Flint Hills, because those are the exposed layers of rocks, aka the flint, that's protecting them. And on the blue part in the southern part of the state, that's the Red Hills, because again, that's creating that protective layer of the softer rocks below it. All right, I'm going to try to wrap this up as quick as I can. Cretaceous period, 90 million years ago, age of dinosaurs. We have the oceans coming back again. The oceans are dropping sandstone and limestone, creating Mushroom State Rock Park, and the Little Jerusalem Badlands in western Kansas, very beautiful. Along with it, you get some of the most iconic fossils in Kansas. You get like the mosasaurs, you get the fish Zephactinus, you get clams the size of people. This is a smorgasbord of fossils. It is well known across the US, even across the world. And again, another place, shout out, going to Hayes, going to the Sternberg Museum, fantastic place to see that. And I also got representation of fossils here from that time period that you can check out.
Not to mention the third floor of Yates Hall at Pitt State, there's a mosasaur.
I did not know that.
It does not have the smaller fish inside it, but it's a beautiful mosasaur.
I like that, and I love mosasaurs too. That's what I studied for my thesis.
So where did the ocean go when they return.
Oh my God! You just read my mind. End of the oceans. Remember the Rocky Mountains I said earlier was the big three? This is where they come in. Even though there are no mountains here in Kansas, and I honestly think eastern Colorado should be part of Kansas because it's basically more western Kansas. Anyway, it used to be. The Rockies still influenced Kansas because as they're rising, it's forcing everything to come up with it. And as such, it's draining away the last remains of the oceans. So at one time, Kansas used to be on the seafloor, but as the Rockies rose, it's draining the last of the oceans. But that's not the last influence of the Rockies. As rivers are eroding off the Rockies, it's dumping sediment across western Kansas. So all that yellow you see there on the map, that's from the Rocky Mountains. The sediment is loose. It's loose that's been transported by rivers. So what's going to happen on there? We create aquifers. Water is soaking in through the sediment brought in by the Rocky Mountains and accumulates there for millions or thousands of years. Even though western Kansas gets about half the precipitation than eastern Kansas, where we are here, it still has huge abundance of aquifers. And like I said, we at the survey study the aquifers and try to determine how much water is left. This is a big focus of our research because it's a big profit for our state after all. It's a big livelihood for the community. And so this is something that we take very seriously. This is something that we study in. I won't go into detail now, but if you want to ask more questions about it, feel free to do so afterwards. But I want to get to one last influence, and that is the Ice Age. So 2.58 million years to 10,000 years ago, the Ice Age happened here in the world. Glaciers crept down from the north all the way to Lawrence, Topeka, northeastern Kansas. And we can see those effects here to this day. So there's something called erratics, which I think are really cool. They basically are these rocks called quartzite that are brought in from Minnesota and North Dakota, and South Dakota, excuse me. And the glaciers basically pick them up and just drop them across northeastern Kansas. You can find people in like communities and gardens that will use their quartzite as little garden burials or walls or things like that. But it's also, but it's also where we can get agate as well. This is one of the few precious gemstones that we can find across the state. When you slice it open, you get these beautiful red banded appearances in there. Really cool to go agate hunting sometime. Go down to a river or a stream. You might get lucky and find some agate, slice it open, and you can get some that are more brilliant red than this.
As you drive 69 to Kansas City, just before you get to Pleasanton is some hills, and I think that's the most southern extent of the glaciers. Is that correct?
That's correct. In fact, the hills, wow, the audience is like, y'all reading, you're like right one step ahead of me. Those hills were deposited by the glaciers. The glaciers act as a big churning device. It's churning, it's destroying, it's just pulverizing all this rock into fine sediment. And when it melts, it just dumps all the sediment in one spot, and it creates the rolling hills of northeastern Kansas. And we have all these different state scenic highways. One of them is the Glacier Highway that cuts across northeastern Kansas, and you can see those rolling hills. You can see those erratics that are still there to this day. And finally, and of course I gotta end on a fossil note because that's me, along the major Kansas rivers, the Arkansas, the Republican River, you can find Ice Age mammal fossils. Those rivers flowed back then as they did today. One thing that I like to do, especially during work time, because then I can just like say I'm doing geologist stuff, is I like to go down to the river after a good rainstorm. The rainstorm washes away the sand, and you can find fossils sticking out. Like, I found this one. This is just a cast, but it's still pretty cool. But I found this vertebrae of a bison just kind of sticking out like this on the sand, and you just push away the rest of the sand, and out it comes. You don't need any special tools or anything. You can find vertebrae, you can find teeth, and I'm always hoping for like a good tooth from a mammoth, which is this. This is just a cast of it, but still a great indication of what you can find here. That's it. That was a crash course. I kind of went over time, but thank you. If you want to, afterwards come up and
I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. This is wonderful.
Again, I'm
Thank you,
sorry
Andy.
for my other speakers that are going over. So.
You did great. and
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Follow that, Larry.
Tough act to follow, but I'll do my best.
Next, we have Larry Spahn. He's going to talk about the surface mining division, surface mining section of Kansas, health environment. And that was great. God, Andy, that's great.
Thank you.
That's great stuff. Go ahead, Larry. Give us one for it.
Oh, wow. After what we just seen and heard, this is gonna be a tough act to follow. But my name's Larry Spahn. I've been a resident of Southeast Kansas all my life. My parents and grandparents they immigrated to this country and were coal miners. And I remember my dad said one thing when I was growing up, said, whatever you do, don't be a coal miner. So I get out of the Navy and I get lucky and go to Big Brutus and work with Carmen and Jim, and but they had day shift, I had midnight, so there's quite a world of difference. But I want to talk a little bit about the reclamation and stuff that occurred after the mining. I mean, before there was any thought of reclamation, it was just dig it up and get coal and go to another mine. But as we moved along, we got a little bit more aware of what was happening to our country and the land values. We've seen the need for some kind of regulatory agency, and that's when the surface mining section came along. I worked for 26 years at the surface mining section there in Spahn, and I was in charge of the emergency program. I took care of coal mine related subsidences, which was when the coal seam was taken out and the water and stuff would go through there. Pretty soon you bloop and you've got a 10-foot hole in your backyard. Most people don't like that. But we gave an avenue to help repair these. And also the regulation of coal mining, there wasn't hardly any of it till the late, I'd say 67 Coal Mine Reclamation Act. But they started to lay down rules, say, hey, you're not gonna leave these dumps all the way they are, Right now, they're really good because we do have good fish and game, which, they did provide a great source of that. But reclamation, you've all seen our strip pit dumps. All right, something more recent. As whether you're coming down 69 to here, you get past the Chicken Annie sign, you see this huge, cornfield, high as an elephant's eye. That land was mined. It was surface mined, and it had to be put back basically to where it come. The reclamation, it caused a lot of strife and stuff, but they finally got it going where things happen the way they should. When they start a lease, there's a survey done. And the environmental impact, the creeks, the forest, everything that was there. And then they have to apply for a permit. And when the permit was given, they had to obey the rules. Your box pit, the first pit spoil, they go down, they pile this up on the dirt, and then they come back and they put it in the hole that was just dug all the way through. But now, before they ever start digging, they have to take the A horizon, which is your topsoils, put it over in a pile at the edge of the lease. The B horizon, which is your clays and shale, that's put over in another pile. Then the mining begins. They dig the coal, they take it out, and they get about, I think it's no more than 3 or 4 berms. That's when the reclamation starts. They start leveling this back out. They put the B horizon in, and they put the A horizon in, and it's smoothed down. And it's really, really neat because you can't ever tell that it was mined. And there is a problem with that too, because You know, you think you got real solid soil underneath you when you build your house. You've got 30 feet of unconsolidated fill that this topsoil and clay's been put back on. So it's things you want to be aware of when you start looking for housing. You know, if you want to build it on some good, what would we want to say, rocks. We're going to get back to the geology stuff. But the foundation is a lot to do. And there's not a lot more to say than reclamation is very necessary, and it has really made a difference in the way coal is mined. Some of the companies got smart, you know, they'd leave a lease out and they'd be way behind, and they get their coal out, hey, let's go bankrupt. So A company goes bankrupt and B company is formed and they keep going. But now, when this lease is given or earned, there is a bond required to be posted, and it's a considerable amount. It is what the estimate is to put that back, plus a percentage to make it worthwhile for the company to go ahead and do it. And they, to get their bond back, whatever this land is set up to do, like if it's farm ground, I think it's 5 years, it has to produce as good or better than it did when it was taken out and mined. So there's a lot of good things that come out of the Reclamation Act, and there's a lot of information at the Surface Mining Office here in Frontenac. If you have any questions regarding the mining, if you're planning on building a house or buying a house, you know, they've got information if there's been any subsidence activity in that area. Where Pittsburgh coal seam crops out right along the edge of Pittsburgh, runs down along, it's Weir, Scammon, and it crops out again. Crops out means where it come out of the ground. The inland sea that we talked about, all these trees laying down, that it, you can see a lot of in the creek banks and the cuts that, you know, it's talking about the highways and stuff. You can see them in, you know, up around Fort Scott. I've worked on some mines in Leavenworth and Atchison, and they were, you know, we're looking at 15 feet in Weir, 30 feet in Pittsburgh. There's a couple hundred feet here or more in the Arm area, but you get up in Lansing and Leavenworth, you're looking 11, 12, 1,300 feet to the coal. And there was some west Topeka too. I was told that coal occurs in every state, but not to a very much of a degree. So this is where we were, I'm fortunate, because we're here. This is a mining museum, and there's a lot of neat stuff, and there was a lot of history made. The miners didn't realize that they were making history. They were just making a living. And they've laid down a lot for us, and it's well presented right here. And do I have any questions? I want to move. Oh, here's some of the things we want to look at. The mining before and after. This one right here, this is site conditions prior to reclamation. You can see the road, you see the pit right here. These pits are 30 to 40 feet deep.
I'll hold it and you point.
Okay.
Thank you, JT.
Little to the left. Okay, these two are prior. See the pits right along here, here, and down in here. Now this is what it looks like now. The hazard is really right here. If you slide off, or you know, slick roads, whatever, lose control, deer jump out, you got 30 feet of water. And usually it doesn't really work out real good because you're going to drown. But we come back, we move it back, way back from these roads, and it's safe. They put more water back, so you still got a source of water. And here's some other ones here, guardrails. Guardrails are not a permanent remedy, but it's something to give some protection. But what we're striving to do is get back here. And there's setback laws on the reclamation, you know, and you can't dig right up to a county road anymore. You have to be 40 or I don't remember what the area is, but in our area, we do have quite a few strip pits. No, we're gonna look at another one, because I don't want to see him get tired.
I just want to show you something.
Okay,
We'll put that over there for these people.
all right.
You want it upside down?
Well, that's sideways, Steve. Right here, some of the before and after, and proximity of the pit, you know, before, and it's, what we want to do is basically fill these pits in. It goes against the grain of a lot of people to see these pushed in, but if you got land, you can have that pit made safe. You won't have to feel bad about a family drowning in it because you want to go fishing. They'll put the water back. They'll build you a pond. We'll build you a lake back in there just to alleviate this right here, because to fill this pit in, you need dirt, so they'll make you a nice lake.
So Larry, the reclamation is ongoing, is that right?
Yes, yes. It's, we're taking care of a lot of the stuff that happened in the past, but they have inspectors that go to the mines. But the last deep mine was closed in 1956, and I think just a few years ago, Mackie Clemens went out of business. But we're still taking care of the problems that went along with it. Only as the law became more strict and being enforced by our inspectors, that things started to coalesce. They said, hey, we can live with this. And everything worked out better. I mean, it's a whole better deal for everybody, and we don't want to see anybody drown in a pit. We had one south of the Cherokee, right before you cross the railroad tracks. The landowner wanted to keep it, but we worked out a deal. We filled, half full. We kind of shoved it in from the bottom. And that next year, there was 2 teenage girls that was going home from Southeast High School, icy road, lost control, through the fence, into the pit. And they got out of their car. They were sitting on the roof. And, they would have drowned. There's no doubt, because that pit was about 30 feet deep.
Who is we?
We is a surface mining section. We are a group of real nice people. But we also helped,
This side too?
oh yeah, here's some more stuff. Look, if you want to look these over, I want to move along because Dave Jenkins got a lot of stuff. We work with the Fish and Game to get the strip pits opened up, try and give it safe access and, to the pits. And Dave's got a lot more to talk about. I know that you guys are probably getting the hell want to go home.
I find it interesting that I think JT's neighbor, whose house, the lady had a subsidence under her house, and your agency moved her house out in the street, rebuilt it, filled it in, and moved her house back, correct?
It blocked Olive Street for 6 months.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was one of my projects.
Yeah.
Now, are they still able to do that? If anybody gets a sinkhole like that again, can they get that done free like you did?
Don't bet on it. There's conditions, each site is an individual deal in how they address it and what's happened and what it's caused. But Gloria's house, she had a mess. It's hard to read. This gives me chills to think back what could happen. But the house moved, disconnected the gas line, disconnected the water line, disconnected the sewer line. All of them open, all of them all. But we did. There was no way to get the thing straightened out so we could get to the problem. And it was quite a convoluted deal, but she got her house moved out in the street and a new basement built because the other one collapsed. But each case is on its own merit. So if you got anything, a lot of people come in with subsidences but said, there's no way, the coal seam 5 miles that direction. But there's a lot of things that make holes, like abandoned house sites, cellars, cisterns, wells, improperly filled. They'll give you the same appearance of a coal mine related subsidence. But call the office, have the inspectors come out and look, and they'll give you their opinion and see if they can help you. Any other questions?
Where does all this money come from to do this?
It is a fee imposed on each ton of coal that's mined in the United States. And it's gonna be a problem because you see what's happening out west and right here. Just not long ago, the Empire District plant was raised. It was a coal-fired plant. They're going out of existence, we're gonna hope for better things, but I can say one thing I'll guarantee you, electricity's gonna cost more. Anything else? I wanna give this over to Dave Jenkins. He's got a lot to talk about. Was that short enough?
Yeah.
Well, I turned the TV off. I thought you were.
Sorry.
Oh, the HDMI should be okay.
Yeah, it's the same. Good, we're all good.
TV back.
All right, that was Larry Spahn. This is David Jenkins from the Wildlife Department. You should tell us about that.
All right, thank you. Good to be here. A couple of tough acts to follow, but do my best. My name is David Jenkins. I'm a public lands manager for the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, and I've been in this job for about 20 years now. I grew up in this area, went to high school in Girard, went to Pittsburgh State, got a degree in biology, and I ran around hunting, fishing, trapping in the strip pits ever since I was a little bitty kid. I've had a passion for wildlife, and heard you could go to work for the state of Kansas for the Kansas Wildlife and Parks. I thought that'd be a pretty good gig. I wasn't a great student, but had to apply myself in college. So, but it's been a great opportunity. I love to work with the outdoor community that uses the mine lands for their outdoor recreation, and so I'll go ahead and get started here. My slideshow. So our goal as public lands management is to enhance habitat and access on the mine land wildlife area, and we're a really good partner with, back to Larry's talk, with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment's surface mine section, and have done a lot of good work with their department over the years. We've spent about $15 million in reclamation dollars to improve infrastructure, safety, and habitat. We've had to sell that program over the years and had to defend it. Some people agree with it, some don't. And but if you drive through the area today and look at the improvements, we think we've done the right thing, and we've, like I said, enhanced access and improved the habitat for wildlife. Hunting, fishing, and fur harvesting license sales pay for the management of mine land. So we try to cater to those folks, our hunters and our anglers, and so those people pay the bills. Although we allow, wildlife viewing, bird watching, whatever you like to do, just camping. We allow primitive camping on the area, so those are some of the uses. So mine land wildlife area is 14,500 acres in size. It's broke up into 47 separate units. 70% of the property was surface mined for coal. And it's located in both Cherokee and Crawford County. Of course, coal mining gives the area the topography. We have approximately 400 strip mine lakes, anywhere from a quarter acre in size to 70 acres. The trout lake, I think, is around 70 acres, and 1,800 acres of water throughout the area. Our first acquisition was in 1926, and our biggest acquisition was from P&M Coal Company in 1981. It's 8,208 acres, which is mostly down around the West Mineral area. Some of the first acquisitions were just donated by small family coal companies. After they got done mining the ground, it was pretty obvious it wouldn't grow anything, to them anyway. Didn't have any real agricultural value, and so they just donated to the Kansas Fish and Game back then. So over the years, that bare ground and the strip mine lakes became really good wildlife habitats. So there's a couple ways of looking at that. A lot of folks look at coal mining like it was a, environmental scar on the landscape. If we didn't have the coal mining that we had back in the day, we'd have nothing but corn, soybean, and fescue fields as far as you could see. So, that's one way of looking at it. But it's really productive wildlife habitat. Deer, turkey hunting are very popular. Squirrel hunting, rabbit hunting, and then the fishery is quite the attraction. Excellent largemouth bass, crappie fishing, red ear, bluegill.
Do you stock all of those?
We rely on natural production mostly, but we do stock channel catfish every year, and we stock walleye, and then we have one strip mine lake, the trout lake, that is spring fed, and we stock trout in the trout lake.
How often do you stock the trout lake, and when do you do that?
Typically late fall, October, November through the spring months, about the end of March.
Where did the trout come from?
We contract with a hatchery down in Crystal Springs, Missouri, and so we've had a contract with them for quite a while, and there's some extra cost. It's a put and take fishery, but we try to offset that through a special trout permit, and it provides our anglers with that opportunity. So.
What happened to the quail? Have you noticed the bullfrog decline, and do you do anything to promote bullfrogs?
Yeah, I just, from a layman's observation, the bullfrogs have definitely declined. I don't know if that's just part of the natural cycle or if there's something else on the environment that has changed. I mean,
I noticed the drought, there's a real decline the last couple of years during this drought period, and then just this spring, as the rains came, I'm hearing them again, around the house.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think drought cycles may affect, those populations, but I know when I was a kid, I'm talking about, mid-80s, there was lots of frogs, 70s, 80s, and back then there was a really strong fur market, so you didn't have the number of raccoon, possum, everybody trapped and harvested those predators, and personally I think that had some effect on frog numbers.
Same with rabbit and quail, they've declined.
Yeah, rabbit and quail, that's another one that we try to focus on as wildlife managers. Just the habitat changes and the farm practices and the herbicide, the effectiveness of the herbicides, and there's just a lot of things that have changed on the landscape in the past 30 years that didn't used to, you know, landscape was different. You could argue that, you know, it's always been the same, but that's not the case.
Hedgerows.
Hedgerows, habitat's the main thing, so. But I'll go on here, talk just real quick about the infrastructure. 45 dams throughout the area, 80 boat ramps, 120 parking areas, 21 miles of interior roadway on mine land, 140 miles of boundaries that we maintain, 2 offices, 2 cabins, and quite a few outbuildings, and there's only 2 of us full-time on the area. Myself, an assistant manager, and then we hired a little bit of part-time help, but we got our hands full, but feel like we did a pretty good job with a small budget. We receive we used to put out traffic counters, and we're estimating about 300,000 user days per year. So it's a big attraction for southeast Kansas, and we get a lot of users hunting, fishing, just enjoying outdoors. Some of the tools that we use to manage habitat is one of them is prescribed fire. We'll try to rotate our controlled burns on different areas to try to maintain our grasslands and reduce that woody invasion. And so if you drive through the mine lands in the spring and sometimes even late summer and fall, we'll be doing some prescribed fire on the area. And even though there's the short-term effect is maybe detrimental, the long-term effect of managing those habitats, it's definitely a good tool to use for that. So we do use prescribed fire. And then this is an example of native grass on the area. You can see the wildflowers and a mixture of native grass, and so we try to maintain some of those habitats, and through the surface mine sections reclamation, you know, we've restored some native grass throughout the area. Even though we've taken out some woodland, we feel like that's a good program for us to try to add some diversity to the landscape.
Do you do anything cooperatively with the Prairie Park over in Missouri?
No, we don't. I mean, that's Missouri Department of Conservation over there, and we do our own thing, although some of our management is probably real similar. Grazing on mine lands, as stewards of the land, we realize that if we use grazing with the right application, the right number of animals, that tillering of the ground helps us with diversity and is a good thing, as long as we do it short term. And we typically graze on our 700 acres of grazing land late winter into the summer months. And it also generates some additional revenue for us to use to manage the area. We try to plant about 100 acres of sunflowers every year to attract wildlife, and our main goal is to attract mourning doves. And dove hunting is very popular. It kicks off the hunting season every September, and our hunters expect us to get the flowers planted, and it's a big deal for us to get our hunters out there and provide some opportunity for them. We have about 700 acres of agricultural land throughout mine land, and so that provides some other food sources as well. One thing we're trying to do is provide youth hunts. We know that we need to do things to preserve our hunting heritage, and provide opportunity for young folks to get into hunting and fishing, and so we'll plant some food plots specifically for youth and not allow other hunters on that property. So that's one thing that we're trying to do is recruit and retain hunters and anglers. This is another example of a youth hunt. You know, a lot of times folks don't want to harvest antlerless deer, so we've been able to work with landowners and provide some opportunities for young people to harvest deer. Youth fishing, this is a picture of, I assume, a mom and a young daughter. They were crappie fishing on the mineland area, and like I said, we're trying to get young people into the fishing lifestyle as well. So it looks like she's having a good time with mom there on the mineland. Improved angler access. Not everybody has a boat. So back to Larry's talk, that relationship with KDHE surface mine section and these projects that we've done with them provides a lot of shoreline access. And you'll, throughout the area, any of these places where we've done the work, you'll find people fishing in the spring, summer months, even in the winter. This is an area, another reclamation. This is the south end of Whitmore Pits, and you can kind of see the transition there. You can see the grade going to the water's edge, and then if you look down the ways at the same picture, you can see the cliff area there.
Are those saplings you've planted there? Is that what those are?
That's a tree planting. That was part of the project to mitigate for the loss of woodland. So we had to.
And you planted the rocks too.
I'm sorry?
You planted the rocks too.
Yeah, we planted the rocks. We did. That's a barrier to keep folks from driving on the native grad, or just from driving off road. That's a problem that we have. So fisheries management, we have a fisheries biologist on the area, and he does some sampling in the spring months, sets nets and weighs and counts different game species, and then if there's any regulation changes that we need to make in terms of harvest and stuff, he'll adjust that. But the picture on the right is the trout lake, and there's a feeder there. We've put weight on channel catfish and trout over the years, and that's another part of our fisheries management that we.
Those look like a gar they got a hold of there.
That is. Kayak fishing has gotten to be real popular past 10 years. Mineland wildlife area is perfect for that. There's a lot of, I guess, hidden gems where if you want to work at it and pull your kayak back into the interior part of our areas, there's probably that 7-pound bass that you've always been looking for. And so we're going to keep some of that hard to get to, but kayak fishing has gotten to be more and more popular throughout the years, so that's good to see. We do allow primitive camping on the maintained areas, typically either mowed or on our parking areas. There's no camping fees. We allow you to camp for 7 days. We reduce that. We've had a problem with people wanting to basically live on the area, and so we've had to regulate that, unfortunately, because we're trying to provide opportunity for all Kansans and in a regulated environment. So, but there's some excellent camping opportunities throughout the area.
No permit needed?
No permit. Not right now, no permit. And this is a picture of the Boy Scouts that, we've done a lot of stuff with different entities like that over the years, and just the statement that the public owns the wildlife area, and we work for you guys. So if you have questions or concerns, you can track us down and sure voice your opinions, and we're open to suggestions. Lots of boat ramps throughout the area, 80 in total. Lots of concrete ramps, so if you do have a decent sized boat, you'll have opportunity to fish the area. We don't allow recreational boating per se, which would, no skiing, nothing like that, but fishing is the main use of the waters.
And no swimming.
No swimming on the area. Yeah, I grew up swimming in the pits, not on the state ground, but.
What if you fall out of your boat?
Well, that's a good question. We probably let pass that, but I mean, we just don't allow swimming. It's one of the regulations, so.
Is that Whitmore?
I believe that is Whitmore, yes. Yes, it is. Law enforcement, public lands managers are commissioned law enforcement officers, and so you're allowed to come out to the area, hunt and fish if you got a license, and quietly enjoy the wildlife area. But if you're horsing around, then we got ways to regulate that. We have fish and game laws, and we expect people to abide by them. Unfortunately, we have a lot of litter on the area, and it's something that we've dealt with I've been there 20 years, and it's just lack of respect for nature and the resource. And I mean, I don't know how many metric tons we've hauled off and loaded up, but a lot. It's unfortunate, but it's something we deal with. And the areas next to Pittsburgh are the worst in terms of throughout the whole area. And unfortunately, had to put up some more gates, and they'll be closed off from in the fall seasons to allow the hunters to have quiet access, but also to control some of that, just because we don't have the resources to keep up with it. We've had a couple of grants. We've got a new office down at West Mineral, and then we have one in Pittsburgh that provides a clean facility to do our work and show up in the mornings, and we're so proud of those state facilities. We got 2 cabins on mine land that we maintain that you can rent. You can get online and rent those. And
Where are
they're
they?
on the Trout Lake.
Okay.
It'd be, where Claythorne Lodge is located?
Not really.
Claythorne, 100th Street, north of 160.
Big lodging straight down.
South, in between Oswego and West Mineral.
Friendship Friends Church.
Okay.
There you go. But we put the first one in, I believe 2007, and then the next one followed. They've been a real hit. We don't have any plans of building anymore, but people really enjoy utilizing those cabins.
Is it hard to get reservations?
It can be. Yeah, you have to get online or call our girls in Chanute and make arrangements, but you can rent up to a year in advance. Mine land bison, we have the Bob Grant bison herd. It's north of Frontenac, something else that we manage, and they're quite the animal, majestic animal. And so we have,
Is there bison there by Big
we
Bruce?
take care of those.
They were, but they took them
Are
back.
they still there, or they move them back?
Yeah.
They're north Frontenac now. That was,
Any chance of them going back? It's a lot more enjoyable down
no
there.
chance. We, you know, that's another one of those stories, but not gonna get into that. But it was mandated that we would maintain a herd north of Frontenac. That's the Bob Grant bison herd. And this is, this document is not updated, and I apologize, but it's just an example of some of the dollars spent on, from Larry's Kansas Department of Health and Environment surface mine section, and it's pretty substantial. Like I said, it's about $15 million over the past 20 years in reclamation work, and as I stated, it improved safety, infrastructure, and wildlife habitat, and they've been, as far as I'm concerned, have been really good projects, and we'll continue to do some of that in the future. And that's the end of my talk, so I'd take any questions real quick. Anything?
Hey, I've been reading about the alligator snapping turtles. Any plans on reintroducing them or anything?
I know they had a meeting last week. I don't know where the reintroductions are gonna take place, so there'll be more to come on that. I'm sure there'll be some information on our website soon. But I know they had a meeting last week, and it's gonna be there's gonna be a reintroduction effort, so. it kind of- alligator snapper.
Really? In Cherokee or Crawford?
I don't know where the sites are gonna occur, but I just know that they had a meeting and it's gonna happen. So.
That's big.
Thank you.
Okay, you ready? Okay, I promise you, 2 to 3 minutes is all you're gonna get of me, and there'll be food after, so you can be patient for 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you to all three of these gentlemen. The programs were wonderful. We could have had them all for their own individual program. They were very interesting, and we appreciate it. So a couple of things, for those of you that attend our programs, we should know by the end of this week if we're getting our 7-foot screen, which will be up here, to replace this small TV. So that will help a lot with presentations so everyone can see. One thing we're proud of this, we just found out about 2 weeks ago, is we are now an official tourist center for the Jefferson Highway. We are the 4th in the nation, so we're pretty excited about that, and that means we're going to be bringing a lot more traffic through southeast Kansas, so it'll be good for all of us, all of the facilities, the museums, all of us. It's going to be good for the retail and everyone here. So that was the other announcement, and I think that was it. David, we want to thank David. He videotapes all of our programs, and you can follow him, Easy Dave, on YouTube, or if you follow Miners Hall Museum, we always post a link to his videos. So, and it's not just our programs. There are a lot of wonderful programs that you can go and follow. He's really documenting the history of the area, and you don't want to miss those. So be sure to follow him on YouTube. And
any information on the drag line?
Okay, the drag line, that was one thing I was going to mention. The drag line, with the weather has been our problem. They are hoping in July that the ground is dry enough now they can get their heavy equipment in. It'll take July to disassemble it, and then their plan is to move it in August, and we're hoping to have the dedication the first week in August. And our final exhibit, quarterly exhibit this year is going to relate to the page. We're kind of going off script of our typical things, but so the October through December will be about the page. Some of the Page family from California will be here, and one thing about the area where it's going to be out here on Gennardi's Corner is we're working with the Wildlife and Parks. They're helping us. We are creating a wildflower meadow around the drag line. So it's going to be a beautiful site, plus it'll be educational. It's going to be a great thing. So we appreciate working with your department on that. So There are snacks and drinks at the back, and you're welcome to stay and visit with any of the speakers today or with Dave. And our next quarterly exhibit is Game On. It starts July 1. Our programs are not going to be typical. They are going to be game days. Some will be cards, we'll have horseshoes, bocce, hula hoop contest, we don't know, all kinds of games. So we want you to come and participate, or just come and cheer on the people who are participating in the competition. So they're gonna be fun. So follow us on Facebook, and I'm sure that all the media will be covering that and let you know on that. So thank you all again very much for coming, and be sure and help yourself back there at the table for snacks and drinks. Thank you.